Chapter 17. I don't know how long I slept. I vaguely felt that it was dark, bright and dark again. I was so thirsty that I got up and looked for water to drink. Holding the fat mug and pouring half a glass of water in one breath, I took out 2 copies of the copy that Oh Young brought, and flipped through it, and at a glance I saw the name of the department store. I threw the folder away with a snap, and I stood up and walked to the window inside. What should come will always come, isn't it a coincidence? It doesn't matter anymore. That department store was my mother's business, but I decided to take the job anyway. I actually know very well in my heart that in the past 2 years, if my mother really wanted to find me, and asked me to go back, it would be easy. The reason why it's been delayed until now is probably because of my feelings. Of course, it could also be that she really doesn't care. A thought suddenly popped into my head. It's fine, just let her be self-destruction. I immediately shook my head and laughed at myself. How can it be? When I come here, I envy the children of other families. They can be mischievous. If they fall and cause trouble, the warm palms or arms of their own parents will take care of them, criticize, or praise them. Mom doesn't pay more attention to me than her poodle. I'm even more jealous of the dog. At least he can crawl on his mother's knees whenever he wants to be petted, and I can't. I could only stand silently in the dark corner, occasionally getting a hug from my mother when she was in a good mood. In my miserable youth, I chose the absurd and rampant way. If I hadn't met Sue at the right time, I can't imagine what I would be like today. And Sue, although he is my light, he is also my demon. I can never be surpassed. When I think about it carefully, I always feel that my mother's attitude towards me is very alienated and indifferent, but I am not. Since the night was filled with darkness and the room was not lit, I stood quietly in front of the window, looking through the tops of the broad-leaved trees to an unknown distance. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Although the gesture was very light, it was especially startling in the quiet night. I was stunned for a few seconds before I reacted and opened the door. I almost forgot about my new friends that I met a few days ago. I was stunned before I opened a smile. Hi, hello. Min is very keen, and immediately noticed my strangeness. He smiled apologetically. I'm sorry, Xiaobai, are you sleeping? Today, there is a coffee-themed salon in the Emerald Forest. Jiayin called me just now and asked you to come with me. Unexpectedly, Min was standing outside the door. Off-white shirt and trouser, a handsome and bright body illuminates the dim aisle. Ah yes, I made a sudden realization, looked down at my clothes that had been wearing it for 2 or 3 days, and smiled embarrassedly. It seems that I should freshen up and change my clothes. Min, you can go first. I'll go there by myself later. I quickly took a shower and changed my clothes. My wet hair was tangled in a twisted braid hanging behind my head. I quickly wear my sneaker and ran downstairs. It was still a little hot, and the soles of my feet seemed to have stepped on cotton. When I got out of the apartment gate, I was blown by the evening breeze. I felt particularly refreshed. Just as I wanted to walk to the Emerald Forest, I heard a honk or two from the side. When I turned my face, I saw that Min was leaning against a semi-old SUV and waved at me. After getting on the car, we went to the Emerald Forest together. The feeling of being with Min is very strange. Although it is a new acquaintance, it is like a reunion of an old friend. No, I don't think Min is the kind of good-natured friend who can be siblings. Although he was considerate and gentle, my intuition tells me that Min is not like those urban youths who are common, ordinary, young and sunny. With the foundation of the absurd and rampant years, I can easily smell the breath of the same kind. And the fact that it also proved that I was not wrong. Sitting in the car, we were all silent. From the front mirror, you can see Min's beautiful eyebrows and eyes. His eyes are focused and firm. When a neon light flashes outside the window, the light reflected into his eyes and become particularly bright. I suddenly remembered that when I was chatting with Mai Mai, we talked about men in the world. My lit a slender lady's menthol cigarette, with light blue thin tobacco strands rising from her fingertips, and stared at the red dot on the smoke. Lazily concluded, there are only two types of men in the world, those who can be associated and those who cannot be associated. Xiao Bai, you are too innocent, I have no choice but to say this. I didn't argue, just raised my face and smiled. Then, Young should belong to the former as far as my concerned. Poor my couldn't understand this relationship in the end. In many cases, social communication is not the same as communication. I remember Jia Yun said that the Emerald Forest was designed by Min. The decoration of the facade is very simple. A large number of unpolished raw wood are used, and only a layer of clear water paint are painted to prevent moisture. The signboard at the door is quite special. It is called Emerald Forest. The signboard is a deep blue like the sea, with cold blue waves rippling in circles in the night, and tiny white laser beams flickering in between. Pushing the door in, a copper bell hanging on the top of the door frame rang twice. When you enter the store, you can see that the layout inside is also very simple, without the luxurious nostalgic or hippie decadent avant-garde decoration of ordinary bars and coffee shops, a lot of logs and glass, brown burlap sofa seats. A little country flavor. What is more attractive is the whole row of glass wall cabinets at the entrance, divided into 3 layers. The middle is a dense and evenly divided square grid. Each grid is a dry specimen of a plant. And the upper and lower layers are filled with potted green plants. Densely prosperous and full of vitality. Everyone can see the 2 plant forms of life and death as soon as they enter the door, which is very shocking. As soon as I arrived at the door, there was a strong aroma of coffee coming out. When I entered the store and turned around the glass curtain wall, I saw that there were not many customers, and they were sitting scattered in 2s and 3s. There is a white screen hanging on the wall in the middle. The projector on the opposite side is running to broadcast the introduction of the coffee origin. A bearded foreigner speaks a bit of Chinese, trying to explain something. Next to it is Jia Yun dressed in Indian sari, which is very exotic. Occasionally interject to correct pronunciation or add Chinese annotations. On one side of the table were many glass jars filled with various coffee beans and coffee powders, as well as some shiny boiler siphon grinders, sets of cups and saucers, and a guest host was making coffee. Min took me to the innermost corner. A small step in the corner encloses a relatively independent space, which is different from the furnishings in the store. Here is a long table made of a complete log, with a row of high-footed metal seats at the back. We greeted Jia Yun, and Min smiled and said in a low voice, "Damn, Jia Yun is dressed like a curry-themed lecture. What kind of coffee salon is that?" Soon someone brought us 2 lattes. The snow-white milk foam was sprinkled with chocolate powder, which was very fragrant. After a while, new guests went up to introduce their own coffee making. Jia Yun slipped over leisurely. "Hey Xiaobai, I thought you wouldn't come." Jia Yun seemed tired, sat down all of a sudden, patted the table and showed a refreshing smile. "How is it? The decor here is quite individual." I nodded. "Well, is it to emphasize the concept of environmental protection? These logs look a bit special." "Awesome." Jia Yun suddenly sat up again. "Xiaobai, your eyes are so good. These logs are actually not logs, they are scraps of wood that Min found from a woodworking factory, and he took great care to find someone to press them into logs. To make it looks like the tree rings and tree bark, isn't it look the same as the real one?" She pointed at Min. "This person is an environmentalist, so he wouldn't let me use logs. Let me tell you, our takeaway packaging here is made of recycled paper instead of log pulp. The cost is much higher. Anyway, he is also half of the boss here, all this is his share." I looked at Min, and he smiled softly. "Since I made a garden designs, I feel that every grasses and trees has feelings. I can't cut my friends into 8 pieces with a chainsaw knife and axe. Jiayun usually breaks a fingernail and will still cry for a long time. Hey, don't say it's so bloody, okay? People don't dare to get a manicure. Jiayun protested, her nose wrinkled very cutely. While talking and laughing, time passed quietly. If there were no subsequent accidents, this should have been a pleasant and peaceful night, but, there will always be a disruption of our established arrangements and procedures. To be honest, I don't mind this kind of existence, and I'm even looking forward to it. Perhaps it's too barren spiritual experience and too desperate youth. My blood secretly grows a lot of anger and depression, lurking behind my seemingly calm and serene personality, always looking for opportunities to break through the gap and rush out. As the night got darker, there were more customers in the store, low South American music was played, and there were people on the small dance floor in the middle. The guest lecture demonstration has ended. Everyone has at least one cup of coffee, and there are many colors. You can also try to make a cup of your own coffee. The music is mixed with soft and slow words. Occasionally, a slightly happy laughter immediately lowers the tone, and gradually people begin to smoke. The taste of tobacco mixed with the strong aroma of coffee conveys a strange warm and comfortable atmosphere. The door was suddenly pushed open violently. Through the glass plant wall, we can't actually tell who the person is, and of course we can't see the movement of the person. The reason why I say rude is because the sound of the copper bell that reminds guests is unusual, not the brisk jingle sound, but a series of dull thumping against wooden doors and the loud metallic sound of the copper bell itself shaking violently. It's an extremely incongruous noise in the original hilarious vocals. Many people have been disturbed. We also looked up and saw 7 or 8 young people crowded into the door, stained with water. With long silver hair stained with water, covered with hanging metal leather, and their unstable footsteps were like a group of bad guys. There is no need to repeat what happened next. These gangsters obviously came to make trouble. When they came, they were already drunk, wantonly shouting for wine, and made a lot of actions to harass others. The order in the store became chaotic, and there were already customers screaming to escape. Jiayun naturally intervened early in the morning, explaining that the drink today was only coffee and no alcohol. The other party's attitude was arrogant. 3 or 4 gangsters surrounded Jiayun in the middle. Min had got up and motioned me to sit still before leaving. I smiled, but followed. After arranging out the evading guests, we walked to the edge of the small dance floor where the troublemakers were. Jiayun had already quarreled with the crowd, and a small gangster was ready to fight. However, his fist has not yet dropped, his wrist has been tightly clenched, as if a beast has fallen into the trap. The more it struggles, the tighter it becomes, and the young man's face under the silver hair begins to twist in pain. He turned back and met Min's calm and sharp eyes. "That's all you can do? Beating women?" Min spit out a few words coldly and let go. In a burst of noise, a slender young man stepped out, who seemed to be their boss. Leaning on a wooden table beside him, he suddenly took out a folding knife and reached out to Min and threatened to play with him. I hardly laughed aside. The god of gamblers has seen too much, thinking that he will be able to bluff people by opening and closing the folding knife when he comes out. It's funny. If that guy hadn't used such a low-level method to be cool, I would probably have calmly watched how Min would deal with him. Min looked leisurely. His figure is the most slender and straight in this group. His serene and elegant manners make him look like a white crane among gray ducks. In the face of malicious provocation, Min was still so idle, which makes the other parties angry. Before Min could react, the gangsters came up with a new trick. I quickly threw a coffee spoon, and it hit the knife. The knife stopped because it happened so fast that the blade had been blocked, and bounced back and nearly cut the young man's own hand. "Shit!" the young man called out. The surroundings became silent at the same time. "If you want to play, you can play with me," I said it faintly. put a few cups and saucers on the table casually, less than a centimeter gap. "Lend your knife." The young man hesitated to pass me the knife. Although I have long said goodbye to being bad, but some of the tricks I have learned before have never given up completely. On the days of living alone, sometimes I amuse myself when I am tired or irritable. This is a secret that even my Mai doesn't know. "What are you doing, Xiaobai?" Jia Yun called out worriedly. Min didn't make a sound, but there was a trace of doubt in his eyes. I smiled slightly, grabbed the tip of the knife with my fingertips and threw it in the air. The knife rotated 180 degrees and fell down. The handle just fell into my palm. At first, the speed was relatively slow, and everyone saw it. Between the rise and fall of my hand, the tip of the knife quickly clicked on the desktop in the gap less than a centimeter between the cups and saucers. They could only see a white shadow, but couldn't see the tip of the knife. They only heard swish sound. As soon as I let go, there was a muffled sound. The tip of the knife was inserted into the table, and the trembling of the blade gradually stopped. There was no sound of knives buckling cups and saucers throughout the process. At this time, except for the unrestrained South American dance music, surrounding were quiet. I slowly raised my head to look at the young man, and saw that his forehead had oozing dense sweat. He must have been awake from his drunkenness. "Would you like to try it? I can lend you a hand." I smiled coldly and slowly pushed away the cups and saucers. There were fine sharp holes in the original gap between cups and saucers on the table. I put my hand flat on the table, my slender fingers spread out to expose the gaps between them. The young man trembled, held his knife. For a while, he suddenly raised it high and trying to stab it hard. The tip of the knife is facing the back of my hand. The crow was silent, and everyone seemed to be scared. Min suddenly grabbed the young man's wrist, and the young man himself seemed to be frightened. He loosened his grip and the knife fell on the ground. I just looked at the knife indifferently and didn't plan to dodge. Because if so, I will lose. Many times, people are more cruel to themselves than anyone else. Just like picking a flower, Min gently picked up the cold knife. Although the movements were quick and skillful, Min's hand was still scratched. Blood slowly dripped and dripped along the blade. Min closed the knife and threw it back to the young man. A group of people looked at each other for a while and finally retreated. The rest of the guests sat down and the atmosphere returned to peace and joy. However, there seemed to be a vague unease and tension in the air. Jia Yun has brought the medicine box to treat Min's wound. I looked around casually and saw two familiar figures at the door. Mai Mai leaned beside Oh Young with a look of uncertainty on her face. Oh Young frowned slightly, his face full of thought. "I don't know when they came, but it looks like they've seen it all. I don't want to explain. In fact, I don't care." Haha, although Mai Mai always likes to put on an uninhibited appearance, but in fact, she still retains 8 points of innocence. There are also 2 points of doubt and disappointment. Of course, everyone has the right to choose their own attitude towards life. Since she likes it, I might as well go along with it. I have already known what is the real smoke, flattery and the upside down of all sentient beings since I was a child. No woman knows better than mother how to win the heart of a man, how to play the world and enjoy the glory. Although she is not happy, it does not prevent her from finding happiness. I have never been a simple child. It's not completely degenerate, of course for Sue, but also for my inner persistence. Without some persistence and perseverance, I would have been in the dark. Before I was 6 years old, I already said goodbye to the word innocence. End of chapter 17.